We are live now.
Oh, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I call to order the meeting of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority Finance Committee for December 12th, 2024. First, we have approval of the October 17th, 2024 draft meeting summary minutes. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Okay, is there any discussion or corrections of the minutes? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to number 3, 2025 Finance Committee meeting schedule, Mr. Long.
Thank you, Mayor Rochelle. We are proposing this schedule really as an organizational placeholder. Obviously, the committee is going to go through some changes in January with new members, and filling hopefully the vacancy that we have on it. So we can always modify it later on, but this would allow us to at least put a calendar for organizational purposes. With that,
Any comments or questions for Mr. Longy? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move for the adoption of the suggested meeting.
second.
All in favor? Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the FY 2026 budget guidance discussion, Mr. Longy.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a discussion item as we go through these next couple of months. We come forward to the committee to get your sense on some of the budgetary proposals that we are posing. I'm not going to go into the local distribution fund. We've gotten guidance on that, and the regional revenue fund, and focus on 2 initiatives that we are proposing for fiscal 26. We may have more initiatives coming up. We have some that we are researching and trying to get a better cost understanding on, and those would come to you at your your January meeting. The target again is to have these discussions over the next couple of months and look forward to presenting the budget as recommended by the Finance Committee to the full authority no later than. So with that, I will ask you to just move to page 2. The first initiative that we're proposing for fiscal 26 is an additional communications professional. We're calling it an additional communications professional because we haven't figured out what title to make it yet. But that doesn't change the underlying work that we're putting into this. We have large consulting contracts, typically transaction, which even though it's on a 5-year cycle, it has activities that go on every year. And then another example is the PDP BRT. Both of those have large communication functions within them. And what we are looking at doing is taking some of those hours from those contracts, and I'll go into the bullet points, but for putting our own staff in those roles instead of the contractor, essentially we will replace 660 hours of contract time with NVTA staff time and end up resulting in about 1,200 hours or more communications activity to benefit the authority overall. Going through the bullet points, experience indicates that while the contracts make provision for prime and subcontractor oversight, our current communication staff inevitably expend a significant amount of time to maintain consistent standards, oversight, messaging format, quality standards. The prime subcontractors change, or their team members change, which then has our people going back in and basically reacquainting them with the stuff that they need to know in order to keep what I just said in the first bullet moving along. A really important aspect of it, in this third bullet, is insourcing the outside contractor creativity and oversight functions. Recognize that communication functions are largely an art rather than a transactional or technological task. If we hire, in case our financial advisor, they're doing math equations that we could do. We just don't have the time to do it when we're under the pressure of issuing bonds or something like that. It's good to have a second set of eyes. I look at that as being distinctly different than the creative work that goes into the communications. And that really ends up needing our people essentially looking over the shoulder of the contractors. So why pay the contractors for that oversight and that creativity activity when it's coming from our own team anyway? Substituting in-house staff and creative and oversight roles will reduce the cost for these contracts, providing a permanent and consistent resource for the authority to use, which will not only fulfill those contractor roles, but will also fulfill other duties, again, as I said, for communications. The proposed position will focus on quality control, proactive outreach, and execution of various external deliverables. But some of the deliverables, we are not replacing the contractors fully on this. We are essentially adding our folks or paying recognition for the amount of time our folks are having to spend with these contracts anyway. And saying, okay, contractor, we're gonna tail back your hours somewhat because our people are having to be there anyway. And then we're gonna take that savings and it'll go much to cover the salary of this new position. So looking at the table at the bottom, just selective creativity hours, there's 2,500 hours spread that we have expended in 3 years of the transaction contract. So we are proposing to take 22% of that in-house. The prime contractor oversight, only 3.5%, and the subcontractor oversight, which also mixes in with creativity responsibilities, 10%. That gets us 660 hours that if we had this position, and a full-time employee typically works about 1,920 hours a year. If we do those 660 hours, we'll have the contracting savings. We'll be able to bring the person in full-time and have them for 1,200 more hours 24/7. So insourcing is not something that I typically look at doing, but I think the communications function is unique enough in, again, going back to that artistic kind of talent side of things, that our people are there anyway. We might as well just put it in as a reality within the contracts and then have that additional 1,200 hours available to us.
I do have a few questions, sir.
So this would be to verify the accuracy of the details and maintain the high standard that the NVTA has.
I mean, as you'll see later tonight at the authority meeting, and as was discussed last month, we have a new logo proposal. And there are strict standards on the color standards, et cetera, the graphics, the way we want things to look, the branding. And again, I go back to it takes a lot out of the communications team anyway. This just kind of formalizes.
Sure.
No, thank you so much for recognizing me. I just, I am a fan of insourcing and I've done comp. And I think it's great to bring people on because oftentimes when you use consultants, it is very expensive. They bill hourly. And so I was looking at this bullet point, you recognize, I guess I'm so sorry, I hate, but number 6. This proposal recognizes that some contracted functions do not make economic sense for the authority to staff internally. This is especially important in the areas of public outreach, mass public engagement, surveys, and certain graphic functions. I'm wondering, public outreach versus mass public engagement, what is the distinction between the two? And why do you feel that's not something you can hire internally? Because Washington, D.C. area, we have so many talented communications professionals, particularly with the changeover in the administration. You're going to have a lot of people rolling off of D.C. and Capitol Hill. I think this is a great time maybe to snag somebody who you can get into this position and have, possible additional savings.
When we do public outreach, we typically call them pop-up events.
Okay.
So we will have teams of folks spread around the region to solicit input on the next phase of transaction or update to the secure program, or solicit comments and perspective for BRT. So if you have 5 of those, the outreach contractor supplies the people for that.
Gotcha.
But our communications folks get involved because you want to make sure they're wearing the right T-shirt.
Yes.
And the right name tag. And that the T-shirt has the right logo on it. So that's our role, but it doesn't make sense for us to hire all those people who the contractor already has under some sort of an agreement and bring in, and they're kind of interchangeable. They're trained to answer questions about NVTA and stuff like that. But I'll look to Abigail. I think sometimes we've got about 25 people that spread across the region for those pop-ups. So in that case, it's just not economically,
Okay.
but we're not tied into that talent pool.
Yeah.
Have a follow-up, sure.
So that was public outreach, and again, is that also mass public engagement?
That's the bulletin blast.
So the public engagement part of, I think where Mike was going with the pop-up events, it's all hand in hand.
Yeah.
So we're having external consultants still doing that work of, they're the ones out on site with the public, because as Mike was saying, they're trained to do so. They're trained to flag somebody at a metro station and then get them to come over, fill out a survey, fill out an online form, and then we will consolidate and package all of that outreach that they've done for us. And then those are the comments that we will be like analyzing in-house, but it's just to supplement that so that our staff isn't the ones being out at all these events and then, flagging people down, and because these professionals are highly trained to do that. So that's where it's going hand in hand, is that type of work.
So that type of work you're still getting outsourced. All right. No, that was it.
Madam Chair, couple questions. So what's the projected salary and benefits, the position?
Full cost with the salary, we're estimating around 100,000. And benefits would add about 30%.
So we're talking about $130,000 for insourcing versus the $100,000, roughly $5,000 in contract savings. And with these contract savings, are these one-time savings, or this is each and every?
It's each and every year. There is some fluctuation to it. Certain years have more communications activities than others, which is why to develop this number, I took the 3 years of activity that we have invested already in transactions. Now that's a 5-year contract. And the PDP DRT contract really doesn't have a timescale on it. It's when the work's going to be done. We're expecting about a 2.5 to 3 year period to complete that contract. So these numbers are just based on transactions, don't even go into the same level of interactivity and savings from the BRT contract.
And excuse me, Madam Chair, if I might follow up question. So your outsourcing contracts are such that you could bring this in-house, these functions in-house, not pay them, but your contract allows that sort of insourcing. Okay. So the reason why I'm asking is this is going to be a relatively difficult budget year for a lot of localities. So I think whether it's this or anything else, I'd suggest the usual amount of care and maybe a little more caution than usual looking at this budget.
Have a follow-up.
No, that doesn't.
I would really support this. I think it's an excellent idea, because if there are mistakes in the details that are presented to the public, this could make the NVTA look sloppy. And we certainly don't want that, because everything else the NVTA does is to a very high standard. So if they need oversight, if they need to verify the accuracy, this is the way to do it.
Oh, no, as I noted before, they are actually doing it. They have our internal team has prevented some of those situations from occurring. So in a way, we're investing about the amount of hours anyway. So this just kind of gives us credit for it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I'm just, you mentioned that our team, your team has, prevented some of the oversight. My only I don't know how to put this delicately. If some of your contractors need additional oversight, and they're missing some of these key details, it might be time to have a conversation or look at other vendors, because communications professionals should be on these. A good communications team knows, these are the shirts to wear, you know, these are the brand guidelines, these are, if you have to take someone to have more oversight, that just, again, I agree, I think it's great to bring stuff in-house if you can. It just gives me a little pause on some, maybe some of the vendors.
Well, we have disputed some of the invoicing. We have recovered some of those hours. And the prime contractor has been very, very accommodating. But clearly, I think there's an opportunity here. But yes, when we have encountered those difficulties, we have questioned, why are we paying for oversight? And, you know, we aren't going to pay for something, quite frankly, that's a mistake.
That was a big picture. This is not an action item, so we will move on to monthly investment portfolio report, Ms. Sen.
I'm
Wait,
sorry.
more.
One more.
Oh, I'm terrible. Gotta turn that page.
Abigail's happy to turn the page, but. Yeah, well, one more. We are proposing a financial accountant. And to be upfront with you, I didn't put this in writing, and I won't speak to it at the authority level, but one of the things we are preparing for is I'm probably not gonna be here.
You think you're gonna retire?
I'm like, looking at it, my wife's a little more on the 3. Even though she'll end up with me home more often, but, you know, we're kind of trying to build the bandwidth to demonstrate. But we also have a real problem with bandwidth. And if you look at the time that I was involved with community, you know, the lease negotiations, finding space and then construction and outfitting. And then the policy 30, as we call it, the policy for not funding cost overruns, underestimates, and transfers. That absorbed most of my bandwidth. And you can say, okay, well, now you're in the space. Policy 30 is going to go to the authority in February. That's going to be over. But before the lease issue and before policy 30, there was something else the year before and something else the year before. So, and part of it is we had tried to use our investment and debt manager to have her focus on procurements, but she can't focus on procurements because the portfolio since 2020, by the end of this year, will have doubled in size. So I note some things, you know, the build out of the grant recipient policies, that was funded because we need some consulting advice on that. That was funded in the 23 budget. We haven't touched it. Grant funding is, you know, trying to obtain that is a priority for us. Outside legal service options, procurement of pre-qualified on-call transportation consulting services, which isn't a budget monetary number, but it was a function that we talked about in this year's budget. In other words, since it's going to be an on-call service, we would come back to this committee and the full authority for any funding on those contracts. But we can't put it, we haven't been able to start putting them in place. The website modernization procurement, actually, you could make a case it's delayed from 23 even. The economic analysis that we talked about at a couple meetings ago. I mean, I haven't been able to get to that one, but I still need to get to it before it becomes too stale. Then we have the duplicate payment audit. But as I note in the staff report, it's not all bad news of things I haven't been able to get to. This part of this is good news. Part of this is growth. So we have seen a 35% increase in reimbursement requests in 2024. However, I will note that is 20 million less than the prior year and 10 million less than our peak of reimbursements. What's happening is, I think, with the 18-month stale invoice policy and the push that is becoming clear to the jurisdictions that we need to get projects delivered, we are seeing more invoices but at a slightly lower dollar amount. The investment, well, 60% of reimbursement requests require some contact from the finance staff back to the project sponsor in order to be able to get the reimbursement in the correct form for us to pay it. The investment portfolio, as I noted, is essentially going to double in size from 2020 to the end of this fiscal year. What that works out as monthly investment transactions have increased from 40 million a month to between 80 and 120 million. That increase in the number of securities has resulted in a 12% increase in the coupon payments, totaling 50 million for 24, and a 93% increase in the number of maturities processed for the same period. That's money that we had invested, its time has matured, got to be reinvested. We are seeing, because the investment portfolio is basically a zero error operation, we can't make a mistake. And so Dev, on many occasions, has come into my office and said, this is what I propose. And I've had to say, I can't look at it. I mean, I physically do not have the time to give it the review that it needs. Or, you know, my head just isn't in the right place to commit that level of attention to it. And so we calculate that we've lost, so far this year, we've lost about $92,000 in interest. That will obviously continue. It's not just the interest lost, but Dev puts a lot of work into what we call trades, to coming up with a recommendation. If I can't address it at that point in time, and we do most of these on a schedule, but some of them have to come up. Maturity, a call, when security gets called, we have to replace it fairly quickly. She puts a lot of work into these before she comes into my office. If I can't loop back to it, that trade may be gone. Especially if it's a really good one, it will be gone. Somebody else is going to pick it up.
Missed opportunity.
And then she has to go back and basically start that function all over. So again, basically the financial accountant position, I've listed the duties down there. It's a lot of things that we are doing marginally well, but we should be doing a lot better. And again, it's really to free up time for the CFO and others in the office to focus on other duties. And also,
I'm sorry, Mike, but I was just gonna add, you know, with Mike informing you all that, you know, he has a retirement date in mind, we do need to start some transition so that, you know, he isn't retired and then we're searching for a CFO and other staff. And, you know, that happens, life happens, people want to move on and do other things, but we need to be prepared so it's a smooth transition.
Comments or questions?
For both days, how soon are you looking to make up? Because this sounds like it's the immediate need for the financial accountant.
no, we actually, I will take this opportunity to introduce two new staff people, Luhan and Gary Armstrong, who are sitting in stand-up. So to be honest with you, bringing Lou on as a comptroller and Gary on as senior accountant, we're going to be busy indoctrinating and getting them up to speed before July anyway. So I think July is the right time for this position.
Gotcha.
If we were to look at one sooner, I would look at the communications position. Because we can kind of make a one-for-one offset on.
And what would be the, again, salary and benefits?
We're looking about the same range as the communications position. Accounting is very difficult to find the right skill at under.
I can see that. I can see that.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, this position is, if I had to choose two, I'm not saying you have to, like that too. I think the number one risk for this organization is financial risk. Because we don't operate railroads, we don't operate buses, but we care. You are involved in very significant financial transactions. So I want to make sure that this function is absolutely filled out and as well performed by the right number of people, the right people as possible. So I'm not saying that we have to do this is
Very
without
important.
a question, so we have to.
Do you have a follow-up?
I don't.
Well, I would certainly be the last person in the world to discourage you from retiring. Do you have some more comments at all?
I think I understand what Councilmember Snyder said, what other jurisdictions are looking at. And, you know, take that to heart.
Moving on to, monthly investment portfolio report consent.
Thank you, Mayor Rochelle. So our strategy at this point is to focus on investing and reinvesting monthly securities in a longer duration, 2 years or more. So this way we are locking in higher yields as the rate starts to go down and it has started going down. We are setting a longer term for better returns. We also do reverse inquiry, which means we reach out to a few e-brokers, or as Mike calls them as sharks. So we reach out to them to find investment options that match our needs instead of taking whatever is being offered. And we also customize our settlement dates, our maturity dates based on our incoming needs, like incoming cash receipts or callable bonds that gets called, or even maturity securities. We mainly invest in non-callable bonds or bullets, and so during the falling interest rates to avoid them getting called early. Before making an investment, we also pay close attention to key economic indicators on Bloomberg. So, which is like looking at consumer price index, GDP, or employment numbers, so that we align better with the market. To give a quick update on the sub 1% securities that yields below 1% in our portfolio. Currently, they just hold 2% of our total portfolio, which is 1.9 billion, and this is as of November 30th, 2024. And as shown as the benchmark chart on page 4, our performance is tracking closely with the ICE BOFA index. And to wrap up this, our main strategy is to adjust, that depend on the market condition, so that as and when we have any economic conditions or market rates, we just change our strategy accordingly. That's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Judge Jefferson, do you have any comments?
I do not.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the monthly revenue report.
We normally go pretty quickly through the revenue report, spend a little time on it this time. And just basically walk you through the charts. We have added an additional chart in response to Councilmember Snyder's in October over the IOU. But I think it's good to have a refresher. Attachment A, which is this chart. Okay, basically shows us the four revenues for the authority. You can see a 7% gain on sales tax because of the size of our sales tax receipts. Helps negate the IOEP deficit. Again, the IOEP is an estimate that we get from UDOT. Also, I was actually preparing a good news summary on grantor's tax with all sorts of information that Deb and I were looking at on Bloomberg and some information from the National Realtors Association, but I'm not going to do that. But I think there is some good trajectory there for us to be looking at. And then the Northern Virginia Transportation District transfer, the $20 million, there's no estimate there. It's $20 million. But so currently we're tracking 1.7% above estimate. We want to be a little bit of attachment B. I won't spend a whole lot of time in, but this is useful for you because it tells you what jurisdictions are getting on their 30%. This information, along with a lot more, by the way, goes out every month to every jurisdiction. So every jurisdiction sees how much we got in, how we split, made the 30-70 split, and what not only they're getting, but they're moving. So completely transparent. The two red lettered or numbered on the second to the last column to the right are two jurisdictions that have not completed their annual certifications. It's normal for these two jurisdictions to lag a little on that. They do have to get them in by the end of March. I'm sorry, the beginning of March. Or their funds would go to the 70% fund. We've never had that happen. And we remind them monthly at this point in the calendar. And as we get closer to March, we will remind them weekly, and then we don't want to have to make that transfer. Attachment C shows you bar charts that go year-to-year comparison on sales tax. So sales tax did jump over the average recently. Hopefully that will sustain. And if we look down in the middle bar chart, that is grantors. Grantors was looking really good. Hence, I was going to give you really positive news, but I'm kind of scaling back on that now. But it is moving in the right direction. Fine. And the bottom chart there is just a bar chart showing sales tax year comparison. The last chart, attachment B, is the information that Councilmember Snyder asked for in October. So the question has been, where are we on IOEP? The IOEP is the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program. As a part of the makeup from the Metro diversion in fiscal 18, this was given to us. It was supposed to be a $20 million revenue. It has reached 20 million in fiscal 22 and hasn't done it since. The reason why you have all these Wrigley gum stripes on here is because we take the VDOT estimate that was used when we did our revenue estimates. So, VDOT will revise these estimates a lot over the course of the year. We take the one that we have used that we made our estimate. So you can tell they're struggling to produce an estimate. Noticeable also is that after 22, the revenue for IOEP has gone down each year. And again, it was supposed to replace 20 million. In the first year, fiscal 2020, it was actually called the I-81 revenue. And we were the canary in the coal mine, if you can remember, that said, you guys aren't going to make it. You're not going to make it. In 21, they recognized that and switched it over from I-81 to the IOEP, but we're still don't have a very good history. I know it's a little difficult to read, but it's kind of a rolling comparison because the estimates keep coming out. And again, we have our distribution for this fiscal year, fiscal 24, sorry, fiscal 25, and we didn't make 20 million there. You could actually go back to the first chart, attachment A, and see that the state had estimated that we would have 21,332,000. We actually have received, and will not receive any of it, 16,740,000. So that is a 21% difference.
Comments or questions?
The dark blue line is the one that we predict.
That's the average.
I'd love to know how they're making those projections.
I mean, I will note it is a difficult process because we get 8.4% of the IOVP fund balance. But I want to double check with Tracy Boehner. But I believe that $20 million was because when this came up, the state through the IOEP had bonds that were for Northern Virginia that were maturing and no longer had to make the debt service payment, which was $2 million. So I will verify that with Tracy Boehner and be back.
Comments or questions further, Mr. Smith? Thank you. Okay, moving on to the operating budget.
Easy to summarize, we are 33% through the year, 26% through the budget, and the budget is actually holding some lease expenses or move expenses that will ultimately be reimbursed to. We're in very good shape on the operating budget.
An NVTA update?
Madam Chair, this is personal, but you'll see it at the authority meeting. Recognizing that this is your last meeting with the authority, you are our second longest serving authority member, second to none other than Mr. Snyder. You know, you two have been on the authority pre-HB 2313. So you were here when we didn't have any funding and you showed up anyway. So we are very appreciative of that, but I really wanted to say thank you for your leadership and thank you for your service, and don't mind me if we show up in Manassas Park every now and then.
Oh, please, please do. If you give me a ring, I'll take you out to lunch at our new Thai restaurant.
I love ties.
The one in the city center?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
great.
Oh, it's wonderful. That's wonderful.
But we'll have something more official for you at the full meeting.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to be here. I love the finance committee. I've learned so much and it's been wonderful. So thank you.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Well, thank you to staff for everything as usual. Is there any other business to come before the committee? If not, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
I am much better than last week.